energy in the room today. Yes, for 5 o'clock? Good. So I grew up in a family that was predominantly male-dominated. And actually, there was a lot of emphasis on man versus woman. It was part of our family, it was part of our culture. And then I chose a career path in technology sales, and that path was also very male-dominated. And I want to understand from everybody in the audience, do you know the term that we use in the US, bro culture, or the boys club? Show of hands, has anybody ever heard this culture before? Okay. So it's really important for you to understand what bro culture is, because bro culture actually is the reason why half of the people in this room with an engineering degree will never pursue a degree in engineering. And if you do, you will leave before your time. In fact, women leave their jobs in technology at a rate 45% higher than men because of bro culture. And bro culture, in a nutshell, is an imbalance of gender. So there are more men than women doing the job. And what ends up happening in this type of environment is that as a woman, you have one of two choices. You either acclimate and you become part of the boys' club, and maybe there are some behaviors and attitudes that you don't necessarily agree with, but you just figure this is normal behavior and you just sustain. The other thing that happens is you decide actively that this is a very toxic kind of environment and you leave. I know all of these statistics. I have been in technology sales for the last 20 years, and I am here to tell you that the statistics do not matter. In fact, they cannot matter because you are all young and brilliant women in technology that have an incredible future. And thank you, FemInno, for bringing us all together so that we can actually support one another, experience this together, and be the support that we all need. So my career is traditionally a very boys' club career. The name in and of itself, salesman. And when I started, this was not a thing. Women in sales, women in tech, it was not something that actively women chose as a career. In fact, about 10 years ago, Daniel Pink wrote his book, To Sell is Human. And in that book, in his research, he interviewed 7,000 people. And he said, what is the first word that comes to mind when you think of sales? The words that he got back were things like yuck, dishonest, manipulative, sleazy man in a cheap suit. So you look at me here today and you think, how does someone like her end up in this profession? Well, it was a little bit of an accident, actually. I worked for a technology company, and the recruiter placed me in this role, and I was a marketing coordinator, but I happened to report to the sales team. And within 18 months, my sales manager tapped me and asked me if I would actually be interested in pursuing a role in sales. Now, within the 10 years that I worked at this company, I got married, I had 2 kids, I went from experiencing this $7 million email marketing company. We grew large enough that we got acquired by GSI Commerce for the largest acquisition in the history of our category. And then, subsequently, we got acquired by eBay for $2.4 billion. And in that 10 years, I was the only woman on the sales team. Now, what ends up happening is you lose your confidence. You look around you, and there's nobody that looks like you. Nobody in the room looks like you. And we talked earlier today about the power of mentorship, how important that is. I had a manager in that 10-year period who believed in me. He would tap on my shoulder, and he would continue to support me. And from time to time, I actually got to know him really well, and I would confide in him. I would say, I don't belong here. I don't see a future here. And he knew my family and my family history fairly well. And he looked at me one time and he said, you are a cobbler's daughter. You have work ethic. You can do anything you put your mind to. So this is really interesting because what we're saying now is that if somebody believes in you, you can overcome the expectation you have for yourself. But this is not a surprise. In fact, this is the Pygmalion effect. And what it says is that if you find somebody who is supportive of you and that person believes in you, then what happens is they set the bar really high for you. And when they set that bar really high for you, you have no other choice than to deliver. And so for 10 years, what I did was use the support that my mentor, my manager gave to me, and I used that to fuel my growth. And what happened in that process is I got stronger. I got more confident. That built my confidence. And now I actually had recruiters looking at me, seeing that confidence, and all of a sudden the cycle continued to perpetuate. So I had a really great foundation, even though the odds were stacked against me when I started in this job. So here now we're getting to something. The first secret to making sure that you are successful in your field of technology when you are a minority in the room is to make sure that you have people who support you. Now, Girls Who Code say 60% of people are actually influenced by a parent or a teacher. In my case, it was actually the mentor. And we're going to talk a little bit about culture in a little bit, right? Because in some cases, you're not necessarily supported by your culture because they don't really understand where you want to go with your career or what you want to do. But find that person. It could be a friend, it could be a mentor, it could be a colleague, it could be somebody sitting in this room. And if you don't have somebody, when you leave this room, find somebody. Call me. Let's create that support system so that we can make sure you have a cheerleader rooting for you on the days that you don't feel like rooting for yourself. So tip number 1, surround yourself with positive influences. Okay, so I moved on with my career, and I took now my second job in technology. And when I signed my papers and I signed on to this team, my hiring manager actually said to me, "We're so happy to have you. You are the first woman on our team." And I thought, here we go again. Okay. So what do? Because I think that you have 2 choices when you're the only woman in the room. You can either stay small and you can hide and you can hope that nobody notices you. Or, we're having some problems with my graphics here. Or, you can shine. You can get big. You can actually create an environment for yourself where you are in the spotlight. And if nobody gives you the spotlight, you take that spotlight. So, on my very first day of this company, I walked in and we were having this off-site meeting in San Diego. And we were doing our quarterly business review, but in addition, the team had had weeks to work on this new pitch deck that they were going to present. And I wasn't expected to participate. It was my first day. My manager just said, sit in the back of the room and just listen. So the day progressed, and all of a sudden we were about to wrap, and I heard a voice from the back of the room, and quietly she said, "Can I present?" And I realized that that voice was mine. So I walked up to the front of the room. I had been taking notes all day, preparing my talk, and as I'm walking up, I realized that the men have now put their hand over their mouth. They're gasping. What is she doing? I heard voices in the hallway, and someone said, "The new girl is about to present." And now all of a sudden, everybody's sitting in cubicles all around me. They walked into the room. We had the 2 founders, our CEO, and scared me in the front of the room, ready to take on a brand new challenge. And so I went. And I will tell you that the information that I presented that day and the accuracy of my content likely was not on point. But what I did that day is that I declared my credentials in a room full of men before anybody had a chance to make a judgment call on me. And I went on to close the largest deal in the history of that company that is still talked about today because I took that risk. Yeah. Risks are interesting, by the way. None of the graphics on my presentation are showing, and we tested it multiple times. So the secret to a long and sustainable career in tech sales: be bold, take risks, find ways to stand out. It feels uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable now. My pretty graphics aren't just right. What are you going to do? You just go with it, okay? Because the real growth happens when you put yourself out there. So get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's when you start to see real change happen for yourself. Can anyone relate to this statement? Show of hands. Anybody? Yeah. Okay. So when FemInno was in Boston, where I'm from, earlier this year, I met a woman. Her name was Anahid. And she approached me, and she told me that she was from a village in Armenia. And she said, I told my parents I wanted to be a data engineer. And my parents told me that I should reconsider and perhaps pursue a career teaching, being a nurse, anything but a data engineer. Her parents didn't realize that data engineer is actually one of the top recruited jobs in all of the world, and that Anahid was actually setting herself up for financial freedom, for a lifetime of learning and growth and opportunity. But instead, their perspective was, what would the villagers say if my daughter was a data engineer? And she told me this story thinking that I couldn't relate. And what she didn't realize is that 5,000 miles away, I had exactly the same story. And now I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that my video works. And if it doesn't, we will improvise. And I will tell you the story of my family. So I am a first-generation Armenian American living in America, Boston. And I've had an incredible career in technology sales. But I never imagined that this would be my life. My father immigrated from Lebanon to the United States in his 20s. And he's a third-generation shoemaker. And he had practically no money in his pocket. And I remember his entire life, he would work around the clock to support my family. My mother's family, they came to America in her teenage years. And what I remember is the two of them worked really hard to make sure that my brother and me had everything that we needed in our life. Now, the thing about it is that we were so protective of being Armenian and preserving our culture in this foreign land that we almost abandoned being Americans, okay? So I went to Armenian Sisters Academy as a child. We exclusively spoke Armenian at school. We had Armenian food, Armenian music, had Armenian friends, but we were in America. And I remember not really challenging these expectations. I just always assumed that this was my life and this was the course that I was about to take. And I never challenged very much when my grandmother would entertain potential suitors to the house for suj, for coffee, to see if I was a potential match with their son. I just assumed that it was just part of the process. But then my life went off the rails when I found myself in my career, and I fell in love with an Odar man who is sitting right there in the front row and is one of the most supportive people in my life, who actually taught me that there is a new way to live. And in all of this, I found my way of finding power in my story. So while my family didn't necessarily understand what it would look like to have a daughter who was in the field of technology, they did understand ethic. They did understand pride. They did understand support. And so a combination of all of those things allowed me to move in a direction that was very different than anyone else had ever challenged in my family. So my advice to you is find power in your story and do not let it weigh you down, because it will if you let it. And as far as this last point, embrace a growth mindset. This is the most important thing that I can share with you, because with a growth mindset comes the ability to learn, to try new things, to potentially fail. Because in this slide, I was actually referencing the video that I made that is not playing, that I hope we can actually get to play, because I spent a lot of time on that video. And it was a story of my family that I put together in a new technology. And I think that that's the point. Sometimes we're going to fail. Sometimes it's not going to be pretty. Sometimes we have an idea of the way we want it to go. And it's happening right now. It's not going that way. But you know what? I tried, right? That's all that matters. So embrace that growth mindset, because you will be surprised where it will take you and the doors that it will open for you. So this is getting comical now. Okay, so my career in tech has taken me quite a way. And in the last 20 years, I've worked for large companies like Salesforce, global companies. I've worked for small unicorn startups. And unicorn is a $1 billion valuation. So these are hot Silicon Valley companies that actually come together and have this new technology. And I've been a part of it all. And in that journey, 20 years in that journey, I have seen women come and go, come and go. And at one point, I got so tired of it that I decided that I was going to write a book. I know it's circulating here. A few of you got a copy of my book in my workshop yesterday, Work It Girl. It's all about empowerment, confidence, finding your voice and your superpower. My superpower is curling my hair. If you know me, you know that is one of the things that I always do to boost myself up. I did it yesterday. I realized it was too hot, so I changed my mind today. But that is my superpower, okay? And so it's really important for you to really think about how you actually start to pull this life together for yourself. Do you see? It's supposed to look like that. Okay. So we talked a little bit about my culture. We talked a little bit about my experience on the job. And I will tell you that it has not been easy. It has not been smooth sailing. And in fact, I had the pleasure of working with some of the speakers and getting to know everybody. And I will say the biggest theme that we came up with is that the way to succeed in your life and in your future is to follow your gut, is to follow your heart. And in my journey, in my choices, I didn't always know if I was on the right path. I didn't know if doubling down on my career would lead me away from my culture and the expectation that my family had for me. I didn't know. And in fact, for many, many years, when my children, who are sitting right here in the third row, yes, when I was raising my children, I remember I would go to family parties and my hokus would say, "Ach, chicas, when are you going to stop working? Your kids need you at home. Why are you traveling?" But then I would feel the adrenaline rush every time I went to work and I closed a big deal and I met with my clients and it was incredible and I was conflicted. And last year, I had the pleasure of meeting Seta and getting to know FemInno and this incredible community. And I will tell you, I did not know why or how, but I knew that I needed to get involved and I needed to have a voice. And I stand here in front of you today and I tell you that all of my choices lead me to the place that makes me believe that I have been on the right path all along. And this path is also possible for you. And that is what we work for. That is what it means to follow your gut. That is what it means to follow your heart. Because in the moment, you may not feel it. In the moment, you may not see it. It may not feel right. It may not feel good. That struggle, the workshop we did yesterday, the hustle, that's real. And it doesn't feel good. but it's worth it. And we are here to support one another. Find your person before you leave here today. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm at Tania Doub. Tania Arakelian Doub. Thank you so much for this opportunity.